The morning I turned 19, I walked to the bakery on Lotus Street and spent every coin I'd earned hauling crates that summer on a box of red bean buns. The little ones at Driftwood House had been talking about it for a week, my last breakfast there before I aged out and had to find a room somewhere in the city. I remember thinking the buns were still warm when I climbed the front steps and saw the patrol car parked crooked across the gate, like whoever drove it hadn't planned on staying long. I didn't think anything of it. Patrol cars came through the Lotus Street district all the time. Inside, the common room was too quiet. No kids shouting my name, no Auntie Shoo yelling at someone to wash their hands first. 2 officers stood by the stairwell, and the moment I set the box down on the table, one of them had my wrist twisted behind my back, and the other was reading me something about a sunk barge, 6 dead, and a name I didn't recognize. I told them I'd never been near the harbor that night. I told them I didn't even know how to swim well enough to fall off a dock on purpose. They cuffed me anyway, and Auntie Shoo stood in the doorway with her hand over her mouth, telling me, gently, like she believed it, that if I'd done something wrong, the kindest thing now would be to confess. That was the first moment I understood how thoroughly I'd already lost. At the precinct, they laid it all out for me on a metal table, a night vision photo of a loading skiff, too grainy to make out a face but close enough in build and height to be mine, a residency slip claiming I'd been renting a room 2 streets from the dock for the past month, and a single sheet of paper with a stamped seal at the top that read, Lineage Acknowledgement, my name linked to a man called Ho Jian, who, according to the document, had gifted me the very barge that went down. I had never heard the name Ho Jian in my life. I had never signed a lineage acknowledgement. I had certainly never owned a barge. Then they brought in a folder with a blood panel matching mine to his, and a few minutes later they brought in the man himself, silver-templed, dressed like he billed by the hour, and entirely unbothered by the room. "I'm Ho Jian," he said. "I'm your father." It landed like a struck bell, and underneath the noise of it, things I'd never understood about myself. Why Auntie Shoo always flinched a little when she looked at my jaw, why no one would ever tell me where I'd come from, clicked into a shape I didn't want. He explained it to me the way a man explains a delayed train. His legitimate son, Ho Jinwei, had been the one piloting that night, drunk and showing off for a recruiter from the Ashfall Academy who'd come down to watch him race. Jinwei had a placement letter waiting for him. Jinwei had a future. What he did not have was an alibi, and so his father had spent 3 days and a frankly impressive amount of money manufacturing one for him out of a boy he'd fathered and abandoned 19 years ago and never once visited. "You'll be compensated when you're released," he told me, as if that settled something. I asked him how he could possibly think that was an offer worth making. He didn't even have the decency to look uncomfortable. "If you weren't useful to me," he said, "I wouldn't have bothered coming at all." Then he left, and I sat there understanding that the blood panel hadn't been mine at all. Somebody on his payroll had simply swapped the sample, the same way somebody had swapped a dock log and paid off a landlord to remember a tenant who never existed. 6 weeks later, a judge gave me 14 years for negligent operation resulting in death and flight from the scene. I didn't contest it. There was nothing left to contest. Every thread of evidence had been spun before I'd even been arrested. In the gallery, Ho Jian watched with the mild attention of a man reviewing a contract he'd already read twice. Beside him, Jinwei looked up from his phone just long enough to find my eyes and smile, not with guilt, but with the lazy satisfaction of someone watching a problem solve itself. 2 months after sentencing, a transport van brought me through the gates of Stonewall Penitentiary. The second my boots hit the gravel of the yard, a voice that wasn't mine spoke inside my skull. "Compatible vessel located. Initializing bond. Ascendant cultivation system trial build successfully linked." I didn't break stride. I'd had 6 weeks in a holding cell to decide that if my life was now apparently a joke being told by the universe, I might as well hear the punchline. I knew, in the vague way every kid on Azure Star knew, what cultivation was. 80 years back, something the scholars called the spirit tide had washed over the world, and the old fighting arts that used to be ceremonial party tricks suddenly let a person punch through stone and outrun bullets. It should have changed everything equally. Instead, the great clans simply absorbed it the way they absorbed everything else, locking the real techniques inside academies with tuition higher than most people's lifetime earnings, leaving the rest of us to watch from outside the gates. Jinwei's placement letter to Ashfall Academy was exactly that kind of door, the door that had never once opened for me. I clenched my jaw in that yard and made myself a promise. 14 years was a long time, but it was still finite, and I intended to come out the other side of it as something Ho Jian would regret creating. The trouble started at cell assignment. Overflow from a riot at the eastern wing had filled every regular bunk, and the duty officer, sweating, clearly improvising, decided to stick me in Cell 0 as a stopgap. Another guard pulled him aside and muttered that Cell 0 hadn't taken a new face in years, and that I might not come out of it the same. The first guard didn't care. He had a clipboard to clear. Cell 0 sat at the dead end of the block. Behind a second gate, nobody else's keys opened. Inside were 4 bunks, 8 slots, and only 3 men using them. Strange. In a prison bursting at every seam. None of them looked up when the door clanged shut behind me. Bunk 1, an old man, hair white as frost, lying flat with his eyes closed. Breathing so slow I thought for a moment he might be a corpse they'd forgotten to remove. Bunk 2, a man missing his left arm at the shoulder, sitting cross-legged, watching me with the flat patience of someone who'd already decided I wasn't interesting. Bunk 3, another old man, a scar running from the corner of his eye down to his jaw like a seam in cracked porcelain. He was the only one who actually turned his head. I took the empty bunk closest to the drain grate, the worst spot, the way I always seem to land in worse spots, and opened the orientation pamphlet they'd handed me at intake. A shadow fell over the page a few minutes later. "You're an ordinary," the scarred man said, not unkindly. "What's an ordinary doing in here?" I told him the truth, that I'd been framed, that I didn't even know the man whose crime I was carrying. He smiled, and the scar twisted with it. "Whoever set you up has real reach, to bury a clean man this deep." When I told him the name, Ho Jian, one of the city's 10 ruling households, he laughed once, short and sharp, and asked whether it had been the old patriarch himself or someone beneath him. I said it was Jian's son, the one piloting that night. "Jinwei, a wasted seat." He crouched down so we were eye level. "Do you want to make them pay for it?" I told him yes before I'd thought it through, then immediately remembered myself and looked away. "I can't touch a 10 household name. Not from here." "You couldn't," he agreed, "at your current weight class. But the patriarch himself only sits at adept rank tempered. Cross into ascendant and you could dismantle that whole family with one afternoon free." He extended a hand. "Call me Master Rao. I'll carry you to ascendant. In exchange, when you're released, you do something for me." Before I could answer, the one-armed man cut in without even looking up. "Don't flatter yourself, Rao. You're barely peak-tempered yourself. You've got no business promising anyone the ascendant realm." Rao's smile died on his face. "Watch your mouth, Ho Feng. Make me." The air between them thickened so fast my ears popped. 2 men half rising off their bunks, and I genuinely believed I was about to watch someone die in front of me, until the old man on bunk 1 spoke, eyes still shut, voice flat as still water. "Sit down, both of you, or I'll feed what's left of you to the kennel dogs myself." They sat. Instantly, completely, like puppets with their strings cut. And in that one sentence, I learned everything I needed to know about the actual hierarchy of this cell. So I did the only thing that made sense to a 19-year-old with nothing left to lose. I crossed the room and knelt in front of bunk 1 and asked the old man to take me as his disciple. He opened one eye. No, whatever came off him when he said it hit me like a drop ceiling. I staggered back 2 steps just trying to keep breathing, and I retreated to my own bunk with my ears ringing. Rao gave me a thumbs up like I'd done something clever rather than humiliating, then resumed his pitch. At 19 with 0 foundation, I was hopelessly late to start, but he had a method that could still carry an ordinary man into the lower reaches of the tempered realm within a few years. Not enough to face the patriarch, more than enough to ruin Jinwei. It was generous to the point of suspicious. Nobody hands you power for nothing. Driftwood House had taught me that lesson long before prison did. But the old man on bunk 1 wasn't offering, Ho Feng wasn't offering, and I had 14 years and a furnace of rage with nowhere to put it. I bowed and called Rao master. He explained the framework quickly. 4 major realms, mortal, tempered, ascendant, sage, each broken into 4 stages, initiate, adept, master, peak. I'd start at the very bottom, refining flesh and meridian until my body could hold real power, using something he called the hollow vessel body scripture. First, he needed to seed a kernel of energy in my core to crack my channels open. Ho Feng made a small sound through his nose. Not surprised, contempt. I asked Rao plainly what he wanted from me later. His expression cooled by several degrees. "Once you reach adept stage tempered, there's a man I need removed. If you can't reach him at peak tempered yourself, how am I supposed to manage it at adept? Because I can never leave this prison." he said, simply, and you will. He wouldn't give me a name. I held out my hand anyway. I needed something, and a debt I could pay later beat an empty cell and an empty future, and he gripped my wrist and pushed a hard, round kernel of energy into me. It traveled up through my shoulder, across my chest, and settled low in my abdomen with a heat that made my eyes water. He seemed surprised my channels took it so cleanly for someone my age. Then he recited the scripture under his breath, a string of maybe 200 syllables, dense and looping. The instant he finished, the system chimed in my skull. Technique comprehended, hollow vessel body scripture, recognized internally as the Ma current. 2 different names for the same set of words. My master had told me one thing. My own system had quietly told me the truth. I pretended I hadn't caught it the first time and asked him to repeat it, buying myself a few seconds to actually read what the system had to say about the Ma current, while he recited it again, slower, for the benefit of a slow student. What it told me made my skin crawl. The Ma current wasn't just a refining method. It could draw cultivation directly out of another body and into mine. On 2 conditions: the target had to be weaker than the user, and the target had to be cultivating that exact same scripture, or both parties' channels would shred apart in the attempt. I thought about Ho Feng's contemptuous little snort and understood, all at once, exactly what Rao's generosity actually was. He wasn't building a disciple, he was raising livestock, fattening a vessel he could one day drain dry from the inside the moment I was strong enough to be worth draining. I kept my face still and said only that some of it was hard to follow. He told me of course it was hard. This was a technique that could in theory carry a man all the way to sage rank, and naturally it would resist a beginner's grasp. He made me listen to the recitation 8 times before he tired of his own performance and went back to his bunk. Ho Feng muttered something about reciting an entire scripture out loud in a room with 3 other listeners. Rao snapped back that if he wanted to learn it himself, he could kneel and call him Master too. They almost flared up again. But the old man on bunk 1 shifted half an inch, and both of them dropped the subject instantly. Sitting on my own bunk, I turned it all over. Rao's story about killing some unnamed man later was almost certainly a lie, or at best a second prize, in case the draining plan failed. His real goal was patience, feed me, train me, watch the numbers climb, and harvest at the moment of maximum yield. But the system had also told me the door swung both ways. If he ever opened that channel between us, and I happened to be the stronger one when he did, I could just as easily drain him. I decided to wait and watch. If he tried to use me, I'd turn the current around. If he turned out to be sincere despite all of this, I owed him enough not to betray a man who genuinely taught me something. Either way, I'd know by the time I reached adept stage. Then I looked inward at the panel only I could see. A pale, borderless window with 3 quiet lines. Host, Lin Zhao, Realm, Mortal, 0-1000, Technique, Ma Current. Comprehended, 0 first status, idle, no buttons. No menus. Nothing to press. Useless thing, I thought, more out of frustration than anything. The panel flickered. Ma Current is insulted by host's assessment. Initiating independent training, plus 10% proficiency. Ma Current has reassessed host's age and mediocre talent. Decides to rely on itself. Plus 20 proficiency. Ma Current refuses to be held back any further. Plus 30% proficiency. I sat very still. This was not a self-improvement system in the sense of improving me. It was a technique with its own ego, and apparently the fastest way to make it train was to wound its pride. That's all you've got? I thought, testing it. Ma Current, humiliated, trains harder, plus 10 proficiency. I leaned in. Shouldn't self-improvement mean it ran on its own, without me having to provoke it like an idiot poking a hornet's nest? Can't you just train without me prodding you constantly? Ma Current accepts the challenge. Autonomous cultivation engaged, plus 10 proficiency per min, plus 1 realm experience per min. Passive. Excited now, I pushed further. Still not strong enough. Push harder. Ma Current overexerts itself. Cultivation deviation triggered. Frozen. 24 hours. My stomach dropped. I backpedaled fast, softening my tone in my head like I was talking down a spooked animal. It's fine. Take your time. We'll get there together. Deviation cleared. Ma Current encouraged. Resumes. Autonomous cultivation, plus 20 proficiency per min, plus 2 realm experience per min. Faster than before. So that was the actual mechanic. Not brute pressure, not constant flattery, but a careful seesaw between the two. Push too hard and it broke. Soften at the right second and it came back stronger than where it started. I was going to have to become an expert in managing the moods of my own cultivation method. At that rate, I'd hit initiate stage inside the hour. I folded my legs, closed my eyes, and let the world believe I was meditating while the actual work happened entirely without me. Across the cell, Rao watched me with a small, satisfied smile I didn't like at all. 50 minutes in, the Ma current crossed 900 proficiency, and I started worrying that finishing initiate stage in under an hour would look less like talent and more like something worth investigating. I tried telling it to slow down, that it had already proven itself. Ma current is offended by the suggestion of restraint, declares no one stops it from growing stronger. I gave up trying to manage it and just watched the count climb. 920, 940, 960 heart hammering, because whatever was about to happen, it would be the first real threshold I'd ever crossed in my life. At 1,000, the kernel Rao had planted in my abdomen ignited. Heat rolled outward through every limb. My muscles cramped and stretched on their own, joints popping loud enough to draw attention, skin crawling like 1,000 small things moving just beneath the surface. Not painful exactly, just enormous, like my body was a room being rearranged from the inside. Rao was on his feet before I'd finished gasping. Technique breakthrough. Body cleansing, he said low. Ho Feng had already turned to look. Even the old man on bunk 1 opened one eye for half a second before letting it fall shut again. Initiate stage achieved. Bonus, plus 100% realm experience. Autonomous cultivation rate doubled. When the 30 seconds passed and I opened my eyes, my prison uniform was soaked through with something black and faintly sour clinging like tar. Rao told me almost gently that it was waste being purged, proof the scripture had taken root properly, and pointed me toward the washroom before the smell ruined everyone's dinner. The washroom turned out to be nothing like the trough and timer setup from Holding. Hot water, real soap, a tub. I stood under the spray for half an hour, the longest, cleanest stretch of peace I'd had since my arrest, and came out to learn from Rao that Cell 0 answered to none of the ordinary prison's rules. Better food, better facilities, more freedom, because it was reserved exclusively for cultivators sitting at tempered rank or above. There's a cost to all of it, though, he added, and wouldn't tell me what. Just that I'd find out tonight, and that I should eat everything put in front of me and be ready to move by dark. By 5:30, I was hollow with hunger in a way I'd never experienced. Cultivation, it turned out, 8 calories the way a furnace ate wood. A guard wheeled in a cart loaded with roast and braised meat, no rice, no vegetables anywhere on it, and waved me toward the regular mess hall instead, muttering that ordinaries ate elsewhere. Rao stopped him cold, told him to bring a second portion, and when the guard hesitated, Rao's voice dropped into something with real weight behind it. A quiet promise to take the matter up with the warden personally if dinner was delayed another minute. The guard left without locking the door. Rao loaded my plate himself and told me to eat without shame. A growing cultivator who skimped on food only slowed his own progress. For one unguarded second, I almost let myself believe he meant it kindly. Then I remembered. A well-fed furnace simply burns longer. Ho Feng, chewing, told Rao not to take me to the Rift tonight unless he intended to actually protect me down there. Rao waved him off, said he could manage his own, disciple, and the two of them slid back into their familiar low-grade bickering while I ate my way through more meat in one sitting than Driftwood House had served in a month, understanding for the first time the old saying about scholars being cheap and warriors being expensive. After the meal, Rao taught me a foundation form he called Splitting Tide Fist, economical, grounded, the kind of thing built for years of patient repetition. Ho Feng watched with open scorn, then stood and, without any stance at all, drove one slow step forward into a single strike that cracked the air like a snapped cable. He called it collapsing wall palm. One move. He said a beginner didn't need 100 techniques, only one that could end a fight before it started. Rao argued it was reckless to teach a man with zero foundation a tempered rank killing technique. My body would tear itself apart on the recoil. Ho Feng asked what good a balanced foundation was to a corpse. While they argued, my panel quietly logged both. Splitting Tide Fist, 1,000 proficiency to initiate collapsing wall palm, 10,000 proficiency to initiate 10 times the cost told me everything about the gap in power between them. The old man on bunk 1 finally sat up. Learn both, he said, ending the argument in 2 words, and looked at me directly for the first time. You have 30 minutes, then we go to the Rift. He told Rao to keep me close, and for one flickering instant something cold passed behind Rao's eyes before he smoothed it away. I'd already decided there was no point hiding. what the system could do. It trained itself whether I wanted it to or not, and the only real choice left to me was who I let believe in my talent. If Rao thought he'd found a prodigy, he might hesitate before doing anything rash. If the silent old man took any interest in me at all, he might be the one thing standing between me and a slow harvest. I turned inward and tried the same trick on the two new forms that had worked on the Maw current. Can't you two learn anything from the Maw current? It's been working itself half to death since this morning, and you're both just sitting here. Both forms bristled, and then instead of training quietly inside me, they did something the Maw current never had. They left. Splitting Tide Fist has chosen to refine itself through combat, departed in search of opponents. Collapsing Wall Palm has done the same. Notifications began stacking on top of each other. Splitting Tide Fist engaged a Tier 1 Voidling, plus 50% proficiency. Collapsing Wall Palm engaged a Tier 1 Voidling, plus 50% proficiency. The cultivation scripture stayed inside me and worked in silence. The combat forms went hunting on their own, somewhere I couldn't see, and fed the results straight back into my nerves as instinct. Timing, angles, the shape of an opening, like someone printing muscle memory directly into my spine while I sat there blinking. Ho Feng's voice cut through my daze. Forms aren't meditation, kid. Get up and move. I claimed I needed a minute to absorb the instruction, which set the two old men off again. Rao telling Ho Feng to mind his own business. Ho Feng firing back, "You know exactly what that scripture does, Rao. Don't pretend otherwise." Rao's eyes went flat. "Are you interfering in another man's discipleship?" Ho Feng glanced once at me, then away, and let it go. "Your business, not mine." That settled it. Ho Feng had known what the Maw current was from the start. Every one of those contemptuous little sounds had been pity, not mockery. Pity for a kid with real talent walking straight into a trap, and a code that forbade him from saying so out loud. I ran the forms anyway, both of them, and felt my body answer with a fluency that had no business belonging to someone an hour into his first day of training. Rao noted, with something like surprise, that I threw the Splitting Tide Fist like a man with actual mileage behind him. He had no way of knowing the mileage belonged to the technique, fighting somewhere unseen, and not to me at all. Then the old man on bunk 1 rose, checked the clock, and said 2 words. "Time, move." We fell into line, me behind Rao, Ho Feng behind the old man, whose name I'd learn only much later was Elder Mu. Before we left, he told me without turning around to stay within arm's reach of my master and not wander. Something flickered across Rao's face at that instruction, gone before I could name it. Elder Mu reached the cell door and set 2 fingers against it. It opened without a key, the lock that hung on the outside somehow already undone from within. I understood, looking at it, that this cell had never once held him. He'd simply chosen to stay, which meant whatever was waiting for us tonight was something even a man who could open locked doors with 2 fingers thought worth staying behind bars to reach. We walked the corridor at 8 at night while the rest of the block slept under curfew, 4 men moving through a prison like it belonged to us, until we reached the main security gate. Elder Mu stepped up to the scanner without slowing. It read his face, chimed once, and the heavy door released with a sound like the whole building exhaling. Beyond it, the air already smelled wrong. Cold and faintly metallic, like rain before it touches the ground. The rift was close, and I was about to find out exactly what 14 years was going to cost me. Past the security gate, the corridor didn't lead to a yard or a transport bay the way I expected. It led down, a service stairwell sealed off from the rest of Stonewall by a second door that wasn't on any blueprint I'd seen in the orientation pamphlet, and past that, a shaft cut straight into bedrock, ringed with floodlights that buzzed like they resented being on. At the bottom, the air changed, cold in a way that had nothing to do with temperature, and that faint metallic smell from before grew strong enough to taste. The shaft opened into a cavern easily the size of the prison above it, lit by veins of pale light running through the rock like something had bled glow into the stone and let it scar over. At the far end, hanging in open air with no visible support, was a tier, not a door, not a cave mouth, just a vertical seam in the world about 3 meters tall, edges rippling faintly the way water does when something moves beneath it. "The rift," Rao said, like he was introducing me to an old friend. "Punches through to a pocket dimension nobody's mapped past the first few 100 meters. New ones open up across Azure Star every few years. Corporations fight wars over the big ones. This one's small, forgotten, which is exactly why Stonewall gets to keep it quiet and run their own little economy out of it." Ho Feng kicked a boot against a crate stacked near the entrance, full of what looked like fist-sized, faintly luminous stones. "Cores," he said. Every voidling drops one when it dies. Cultivators harvest them, the prison sells them, the warden skims his cut, and anyone who clears their quota gets time shaved off a sentence. Everyone wins except whatever's on the other side of that tear. I asked how much time a kill was worth. Depends on the tier, Rao said. A tier 1 voidling's worth a day, maybe 2. You're not going to be fighting anything higher than that tonight. He didn't say it like a rule. He said it like a decision he'd already made for me. Elder Mu walked straight toward the seam without slowing, and the rest of us fell in behind him, the way water falls toward a drain. I had half a second to wonder whether stepping through a tear in reality was going to feel like anything at all, and then it was behind me, and the floodlit cavern was gone, and I was standing in a forest that had never seen a sun. The trees here grew the wrong way, branches curling down into the soil instead of reaching up, leaves the color of old bruises. The light came from nowhere I could identify, a flat gray glow that made every shadow look like it was hiding something extra. My system panel flared the moment we crossed over. Zone entered, the hollow reach, tier 1 to 2 verified, splitting tide fist, autonomous hunting resumed. Collapsing wall palm, autonomous hunting resumed. I felt the 2 combat forms peel away from me again like dogs slipping a leash, vanishing into the trees, and almost immediately the proficiency notifications started ticking upward in the corner of my vision. Rao caught me staring into the middle distance and mistook it for fear, clapping a hand on my shoulder. First time always feels like this, he said. Stay close, watch how I move before you try anything yourself. We hadn't gone 50 meters before the first voidling found us, a thing like a wolf assembled out of wrong angles, its hide a deep, light-swallowing black except for a pale crack running down its spine where something inside it glowed faintly red. It came out of the brush low and fast, and Rao met it without breaking stride, a single open palm strike that sent it skidding backward into a tree hard enough to crack the trunk. It didn't get up a second time. Where it had been standing, a fist-sized stone dropped to the ground and rolled to a stop, pulsing the same faint red as the crack in its hide had. Tier 1, Rao said, pocketing the core without looking especially impressed by his own work. Most of what nests near the entrances. Go on, try the next one yourself. I didn't have to wait long. A second wolf thing broke cover to my left, and before I'd fully processed that it was coming, my body moved on its own. Feet shifting into the stance Rao had drilled me through an hour ago, hips turning. Fist driving forward in a strike that felt less like something I'd chosen, and more like something that had simply been waiting in my arm for the chance. It connected with a sound like a dropped sandbag, and the voidling went down and didn't move again. I stood there breathing hard, more startled by my own competence than by the dead thing at my feet. Rao's eyebrows had gone up a fraction. Splitting tide fist, real-time host execution detected, plus 15 proficiency, manual bonus. 1-day sentence reduction. A whole day, for 1 punch. I picked up the core with a hand that wasn't quite steady and understood, in a way I hadn't fully let myself understand before, exactly how much currency violence was worth down here. We pushed deeper. Orphan fought one-handed with an economy that made Rao's strikes look showy by comparison. Every motion doing double duty, blocking and countering in the same breath, his missing arm never once slowing him down in a way I could see. Elder Mu didn't fight at all. He walked through the hollow reach like the forest itself had agreed in advance not to bother him, and twice I watched voidlings veer away from his path entirely, vanishing back into the brush rather than come within 10 meters of him. My own forms kept feeding me proficiency from kills I never witnessed. Distant pings of splitting tide fist encountered and defeated a tier 1 voidling arriving in clusters, my realm experience climbing in the background while I fought my own battles in the foreground. By the time we'd gone perhaps 2 kilometers in, my system panel read numbers I wouldn't have believed that morning. Host, Lin Zhao. Realm, initiate tempered, 640, 2000. Splitting tide fist. Adept, 3,825,000 to master. Collapsing wall palm, initiate, 2,145,000 to adept. Sentence reduction accrued tonight. 11 days, 11 days. In under 2 hours. I did the math without meaning to. 14 years was 5,110 days. At this rate, I would be an old man myself before I cut it down to nothing through sentence reduction alone. But sentence reduction wasn't really the point anymore, and some part of me had known that since the moment the system first chimed in my skull. The point was what I'd be capable of by the time I walked out those gates, however many years it took. Rao kept glancing at my panel readout. He couldn't see the numbers themselves, but he could see the results, the speed, the clean kills, and something in his expression had shifted from pleased to calculating somewhere around kill number 9. He started steering me toward thicker clusters of voidlings, instead of thinning them out for me the way he had at the start, watching how I handled 3 at once instead of 1. I told myself it was a teacher pushing a promising student. I made myself remember, underneath that thought, exactly what he actually wanted from a promising student, once the student was promising enough. It was Ho Feng who finally said the thing out loud, low enough that only I could hear it as we picked our way around a shallow ravine. "You're growing too fast, kid. Faster than anything I've seen out of a body this fresh." He didn't look at me when he said it. "Whatever's helping you, and don't tell me, I don't want to know. Keep some of it to yourself around him." A tilt of his chin toward Rao's back. "A furnace that fills up quick gets emptied quick too." I told him I'd noticed. "Good," he said, and left it there. We were close to 3 kilometers in, deeper than Rao had apparently intended to go, when the forest changed. The wrong-angled trees thinned out into open ground, gray dust underfoot instead of soil, and ahead of us, rising out of the dust like a tooth out of a jaw, stood a structure that had no business existing in a pocket dimension nobody had supposedly mapped past the first few hundred meters. A gate. Stone, easily 20 meters tall, carved with characters in no script I recognized, and split top to bottom by a single crack of absolute, light-eating black. Elder Moose stopped walking. In 4 hours of watching him move through a monster-infested forest like it was a garden path, I had not once seen him stop for anything. He stood completely still, head tilted slightly, and for the first time since I'd met him, something crossed his face that I could only describe as attention, real attention. The kind a man pays when he's recalculating how dangerous a situation actually is. "That wasn't here," he said. Quiet, almost to himself. Rao went pale in a way that didn't suit him at all. "It's been sealed since before this rift was logged. Stonewall's never gone past it. There's nothing on the other side of it in any survey." "There wasn't a crack in it either," Elder Moose said. "The last time I came this far." My system flared without any provocation from me at all. No insult, no encouragement, nothing I'd done to trigger it. Just a notification stacking up so fast the words blurred together before settling. Warning. Unregistered presence detected beyond local instance. Ma current resonance spike, 340%. Source signature unknown. Partial match to host technique lineage. Partial match. My scripture. The thing siphoning into my core every minute I sat still, the thing Rao had taught me with 2 different names in 2 different mouths, was recognizing something on the other side of that gate. Recognizing it the way you'd recognize a relative you'd never met. The crack in the stone widened a hair's width with a sound like a tooth coming loose, and a draft came through it that was warmer than anything else in that cold, dead forest, warm like breath, and underneath the howl of wind through the gap I heard, or felt, I couldn't tell which, something that might have been a voice shaping the first syllable of a word. Ho Feng's remaining hand had already closed around my shoulder, dragging me backward. "Oh, oh." Elder Moo didn't move. He was staring at the crack the way a man stares at a debt he thought he'd finished paying, and when he finally spoke, his voice had lost every trace of the bored, bottomless calm I'd heard from him since the moment we met. "Get the boy out of here," he said. "Now." And behind us, deep in the gray dust where nothing had been standing a second before, something exhaled. A special shout-out to our precious members.